Imagine standing in the middle of a desert, no water, no shelter, no end in sight. The sun burns like fire from above, the sand scorches beneath, and every breath feels like swallowing flames. Fear whispers that it's over. Pain screams that the body can't go on. Doubt tempts surrender with every step. Yet in that silence, something rises courage, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. Step by step, it pushes forward through the impossible, until the desert itself reveals what it tried to hide: hope, life, and survival. This isn't just a story of being lost in the desert. It's a story of how courage saves a life. The desert is a place where silence is louder than any sound, where each grain of sand seems to hold the weight of time itself. The horizon stretches endlessly, a flat line blurred by heat waves rising from the ground. The sun, high and unyielding, blazes down like a molten crown, showing no mercy to anything beneath it. In every direction, the eye meets only dunes, sculpted by the wind into shapes both beautiful and cruel. They rise and fall like frozen waves, trapping those who wander within their shifting labyrinth. No clouds mark the sky, no birds circle above, no shade offers relief, only an ocean of sand stretching into infinity. The heat presses onto the skin, sinking into the bones, pulling moisture out with each passing second. The air itself feels heavy, as if breathing fire instead of oxygen. Every inhalation burns the throat, leaving it dry as if scraped with stone. The lips begin to crack, and the tongue, swollen from thirst, sticks to the roof of the mouth. Sweat, once flowing in rivers, ceases as the body realizes there is nothing left to give. The skin tightens, scorched by the relentless sun, while the eyes squint against the blinding glare reflecting off golden dunes. Walking across the sand is a torment of its own. Each step sinks deep, making the legs work twice as hard, dragging feet upward only to be swallowed again. The sand slips away like liquid beneath, as though the ground itself is mocking the struggle. Heat radiates upward from below, as if the desert burns from both earth and sky. With every dune climbed, another appears, higher, wider, stretching endlessly with no sign of relief. Time loses meaning. The sun seems never to move, frozen at its peak, as though trapping the world in a furnace. The silence is suffocating. It is not the peaceful quiet of a forest or the calm hush of the sea. It is a silence that taunts, a reminder of isolation. No rustle of leaves, no hum of insects, no whisper of flowing water, just the soft hiss of sand shifting with the wind. The mind begins to play tricks, filling the emptiness with sounds that are not there. A phantom drip of water, the call of a voice, the rustle of something moving. Yet when the head turns, nothing waits, only the unbroken stillness of the desert's grasp. The sun, merciless and unmoving, becomes a predator. It beats down with ruthless consistency, stripping away energy, weakening muscles, and searing the skin. Shadows vanish beneath its glare, and without shade, the body becomes an open flame. The eyes sting with dryness, searching desperately for any sign of life. Perhaps a cactus, a scraggly bush, even the faintest trace of green, but nothing appears. Only sand, endless and unforgiving, spreading in all directions as if to erase the existence of everything else. Mirages rise from the heat like cruel illusions. On the horizon, shimmering lakes of silver appear, reflecting light as though water waits just a short distance away. The heart leaps with fragile hope, and the legs, exhausted, push forward. Yet as the dunes shift closer, the vision dissolves into nothingness, replaced by more sand, more emptiness, more despair. The desert laughs in silence, dangling salvation just out of reach, only to snatch it away when it seems within grasp. Night falls not with comfort, but with another kind of cruelty. The blazing sun retreats, but the desert does not forgive. Heat fades swiftly, leaving a bone, chilling cold in its wake. The sand that burned like fire now turns into ice, sucking warmth from the body. Stars scatter across the sky in breathtaking beauty, but their brilliance offers no heat, only a reminder of how far away the universe truly is. The silence deepens, pressing down heavier than the cold, broken only by the whisper of the wind shaping dunes in the darkness. The body shivers, trembling uncontrollably, fighting to preserve the little warmth left within. The vastness of the desert feels alive, as though it watches from every direction. Each dune looks the same, giving no hint of direction, no promise of escape. There are no landmarks, no roads, no trails, only the unending repetition of sand. It is a place where time and space blur, where days could stretch into weeks and nights could collapse into seconds. The desert erases identity, demanding surrender, testing whether the will to continue is stronger than the desire to collapse into its embrace. Yet, within this expanse of emptiness, there is an undeniable power. The sheer scale of the desert humbles everything that enters it. The sun and sand strip away all illusions of control, reminding that survival is never guaranteed. It is a realm where strength alone is not enough, where endurance is forged not only by the body, but by the spirit. Each grain of sand seems to whisper of those who walked before, of bones buried beneath the dunes, of stories untold and lives claimed by the silence. The desert does not bend to the will of those who cross it. Instead, it demands reverence, resilience, and an unshakable will to endure its trial. The first signs of desperation arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, like shadows creeping across the edge of vision. At first, it feels like nothing more than dryness in the mouth, a faint ache at the back of the throat. But as the minutes stretch into hours, that dryness grows sharper, turning into a raw burn that no swallow can soothe. The tongue swells slightly, sticking to the roof of the mouth, and every attempt to speak results in only a rasp of sound. The body, built to function with water flowing through its veins, begins to protest as the supply dwindles. Muscles grow heavy, movements slower, and each breath feels like inhaling dust. Thirst is unlike any other hunger. Food deprivation brings a dull ache, a hollowness in the stomach, but thirst attacks the body with fire. It strips away strength, steals clarity of thought, and burns with a persistence that cannot be ignored. The lips, once supple, split open into painful cracks, stinging whenever air brushes against them. Even the smallest droplet of moisture becomes a fantasy, an obsession. Thoughts circle endlessly around the idea of water-cool streams, sweating bottles, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. Each vision flickers like a mirage, as cruel as the desert itself, reminding of what cannot be reached. Walking becomes a battle not against the distance, but against the weight of exhaustion pressing down with each step. Sand shifts underfoot, dragging legs downward as though trying to hold them in place. The calves and thighs burn, the back aches, and the shoulders throb from the strain of carrying even the lightest load. Each dune climbed feels like the last, as though the body might collapse at the top and never rise again. The sun above gives no relief, its heat pouring relentlessly onto skin already scorched. Every gust of wind offers no comfort, carrying not coolness but grains of sand that sting the eyes and grind between dry teeth. Inside the mind, panic stirs. At first, it is just a whisper. What if no water is found? What if the desert stretches on forever? Those whispers soon swell into storms of fear, threatening to overwhelm reason. The imagination conjures images of bleached bones half buried in the sand, of circling vultures waiting patiently for weakness to become surrender. The body still moves, but the mind begins to question the worth of each step. Fatigue settles not only in muscles, but in thoughts, as if even hope is too heavy to carry. The greatest enemy is not the desert, but the silence within. With no distraction, no sound but the pounding heartbeat and the crunch of sand underfoot, the mind amplifies every fear. It replays worst case endings, weaving stories of collapse, of thirst winning its merciless battle. In that silence, doubts multiply. What if every direction is wrong? What if each step leads deeper into the endless maze? The desert becomes a mirror, reflecting not only the vast emptiness outside, but also the shadows lurking inside the mind. As strength fades, the smallest signs of weakness feel monumental. Knees tremble when climbing a dune, and it takes longer to catch breath at the top. Vision blurs, not only from the blinding sun, but from the lack of fluid in the body. Dizziness comes in waves, forcing pauses that grow longer and longer. The body begins to beg for rest, whispering seductively that lying down in the warm sand for just a moment might help. Yet the desert is merciless. Rest is not comfort but surrender. To give in to that desire is to slip quietly toward the fate written in the dunes. Every survival instinct clashes with despair. One part of the mind screams to keep moving, to fight, to endure. Another part pleads for release, for an end to the suffering, for the chance to simply stop. The battle between these voices grows louder as thirst gnaws deeper. Each decision, whether to climb another dune, whether to continue walking, whether to pause, becomes heavier, weighted with the threat of finality. The desert tests not just the body's limits, but the strength of will itself. Even the smallest fragment of hope becomes a lifeline. The thought of a distant memory, a family meal, the laughter of loved ones, the feeling of cool rain flares in the mind and offers enough strength for one more step. Imagination, once the source of fear, becomes both enemy and ally. It paints vivid pictures of failure, but also of survival, of reaching safety, of finding shade and water and relief. The challenge becomes choosing which vision to follow, which to believe in, and which to silence. Desperation shifts into determination, not with grand gestures, but with tiny acts of defiance. A step taken when the body begs to fall, a breath pulled in when the lungs feel empty, a refusal to listen to the whispers of fear when they grow loudest. Survival is not an act of strength in those moments, but of persistence, of choosing again and again to move forward, no matter how small the progress. Each painful movement becomes a statement: the desert has not won yet. As hours pass, the body weakens further, but the will hardens. The mind begins to realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it. The desert will not offer kindness, but neither will it easily break a spirit that refuses to yield. Desperation sharpens into clarity. The choice is to keep fighting, even when every instinct screams for rest, even when thirst becomes unbearable. Fear in the desert does not arrive with a roar, but with a whisper. It begins as a subtle tightening in the chest, a restless thought echoing in the back of the mind. The silence around magnifies it, stretching it until it fills the air like an unseen presence. With each passing moment, the shadows of possibility grow darker. Images of collapse, bones half, buried beneath the dunes, vultures circling high in the sky, waiting for the inevitable. The sun above, scorching and merciless, feels like a reminder that time is running out, and the desert is patient enough to claim whatever is left. The vast emptiness fuels the unease. In every direction, The view is the same waves of sand, endless and repetitive, with no sign of difference or direction. It is as though the world itself has vanished, leaving only a barren wasteland. This sameness becomes a prison, making it nearly impossible to know if progress is real or imagined. Doubt creeps in. What if every step is a step deeper into nowhere? What if the dunes are not being crossed, but are circling back again and again, trapping within an endless loop? These thoughts are seeds of fear, and once planted, they begin to grow rapidly, threatening to consume reason. The body adds to the torment. With thirst burning through the throat and weakness in every limb, the feeling of vulnerability becomes overwhelming. Muscles tremble not only from exhaustion, but from the dread of collapse. Every falter in balance feels like a warning, every wave of dizziness a sign of surrender inching closer. The body, fragile against the enormity of the desert, feels smaller with each moment, and the knowledge of its limit fuels the fear even further. At times, the mind plays cruel tricks. The silence is broken by phantom sounds. The imagined rush of water, the faint echo of voices, the distant bark of a dog. Hope rises at these illusions only to be crushed when reality reveals nothing but stillness. Each false signal sharpens fear, for it is no longer only the desert that must be endured, but also the mind itself, weaving stories that lead nowhere. The line between what is real and what is imagined blurs, and in that uncertainty, terror grows stronger. The sky, a vast and relentless dome, adds to the feeling of exposure. There is no shelter, no place to hide, no way to escape the gaze of the sun. In that openness, the sense of being hunted grows. The desert is not an enemy that attacks directly. It waits, presses, exhausts, and tests. Fear builds from this awareness that the battle is not against a single moment of danger, but against a slow, unending erosion of strength and will. Nightfall does not end the fear, it reshapes it. When the sun disappears, the cold cuts into the skin, and darkness hides the path ahead. The dunes, once golden and harsh, transform into looming shadows that seem to move with the shifting moonlight. Every sound becomes amplified: the whistle of the wind, the shifting grains of sand, even the beating of the heart. In the stillness, imagination fills the void with predators, unseen dangers lurking just beyond vision. Fear tightens its grip, reminding that the desert's threats are not only physical, but also psychological, designed to dismantle courage piece by piece. Fear whispers of surrender. It tempts with the thought of laying down, of closing weary eyes, of letting the sand cover what is left. It promises a release from the struggle, a quick end to the suffering. This is the darkest form of fear, the one that does not shout but persuades, the one that cloaks itself as kindness. Yet beneath the softness lies the truth. To listen is to end the fight, to dissolve into the silence of the desert forever. Against this shadow, resistance becomes an act of defiance. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey its commands. Each step taken despite the trembling of legs, each breath drawn despite the burn in the lungs, becomes a rebellion. Fear is acknowledged but not allowed to decide the path. It hovers, it presses, it claws at the edges of thought, but it is met with persistence, with a stubborn choice to move forward when all instincts scream otherwise. The desert is a test not of strength, but of resilience. Fear is part of the trial, as real as the heat of the sun and the dryness of the air. It demands to be faced, not avoided. To survive, one must walk with it, endure its whispers, and continue despite its weight. In this crucible, the understanding emerges that survival is not just about defeating the desert, but about mastering the fear that it brings. In the suffocating emptiness of the desert, where the body aches and the mind grows weary, memory becomes both a torment and a lifeline. As the heat burns into the skin and the dryness carves deeper into the throat, the mind begins to wander away from the present suffering. Faces appear in the imagination, vivid and sharp, cutting through the haze of exhaustion. They do not arrive as deliberate thoughts, but as sudden flashes. A smile once seen, a laugh once heard, the sound of a familiar voice carried on the winds of memory. These fragments rise without warning, and for a moment the desert fades. Every detail takes on new power. The recollection of cool water poured into a glass feels more real than the sand beneath tired feet. The memory of rain falling on a rooftop becomes a sensation that the body almost believes it can feel again. Simple moments, once unnoticed, now shine like treasures in the mind. The smell of fresh bread, the comfort of sitting in shade, the sound of children running barefoot across the street. All of these images play like scenes from another world, a world that seemed impossibly far away yet desperately needed for strength. There is pain in these memories, for they remind of what has been lost in this moment of isolation. But within that pain lies a spark, a reminder of connection, of meaning. To give up in the desert would mean never returning to those fragments, never again experiencing the warmth of family gatherings or the relief of water sliding down the throat. The thought of absence becomes unbearable, and in that unbearable weight is found the will to keep pushing forward. Memories transform from ghosts into anchors, holding the mind steady against the storm of despair. Sometimes they come as voices, the words of a parent urging not to give up, the encouragement of a teacher, the laughter of friends, all rise within, echoing louder than the silence around. They remind that existence is not alone, that life is tied to others who wait beyond the desert. Even if physically absent, their presence is felt in the strength of recollection, in the invisible ties that stretch across the sand. Each step taken carries with it not just the weight of survival, but the responsibility of returning to those who once gave love, guidance, and purpose. The desert strips away everything: water, strength, comfort, but it cannot strip away memory. The body may weaken, the voice may falter, yet the mind clings stubbornly to those images of belonging. They are shields against despair, bursts of light in an environment built to crush hope. In the cruelest hours, when the dunes seem endless and the horizon blurs into nothingness, memory becomes the only proof that life once held warmth, color, and meaning beyond this suffering. The strength of memory lies in its persistence. Even when exhaustion clouds thought, even when eyes blur and steps falter, those flashes return. A promise once made resurfaces, to succeed, to come back, to never give in. A scene replays, the touch of a hand, the comfort of a familiar place, and it becomes a vow silently repeated in the mind. It is not courage born of emptiness, but courage drawn from love, responsibility, and connection to something greater than the self. These recollections ignite determination. They transform the desert from a place of endless suffering into a trial that must be overcome, a passage that separates the present moment of agony from the return to those cherished fragments of life. Memories are not passive, they fuel action. Each grain of sand crossed is one step closer to reunion. Each painful breath, a refusal to let those faces become nothing more than pictures held by others in grief. At times, memory becomes sharper than reality. The sound of rain or the vision of shade feels more tangible than the dunes stretching endlessly ahead. This merging of past and present can be cruel, tricking the senses into believing relief is near. Yet even these illusions serve a purpose. They remind that life is more than this barren expanse, that beauty still exists, waiting beyond the horizon. Even if painful, these visions provide a reason to resist collapse. The desert does not allow distractions, and perhaps that is why memory becomes so powerful within it. Stripped of noise, stripped of comfort, stripped of all unnecessary weight, the mind turns inward. What remains are the essential truths, the people who matter, the moments that shaped purpose, the promises that give life meaning. These truths become the foundation upon which survival rests. Without them, despair would consume entirely. With them, there is something worth enduring every blister, every wave of thirst, every whisper of fear. In the stillness of the desert night, when stars scatter across the sky in cold brilliance, memory becomes both comfort and fuel. It softens the loneliness while strengthening resolve. It reminds that this struggle is not just about surviving another day in the sand. It is about returning to what was left behind, about fulfilling the silent vows carried in the heart. The desert tests the body, but memory steadies the spirit, keeping the flame of hope alive even when everything else conspires to extinguish it. The desert does not bargain. It presents only two choices: to stop and surrender, or to rise and continue forward. The weight of this decision presses heavier than the scorching sun or the endless dunes. Every fiber of the body screams for rest, every nerve begs for release. Yet something deeper whispers that the will to fight must not be abandoned. Survival in such a place does not come from comfort, but from choosing defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Exhaustion gnaws at the muscles, dragging each step into the sand as though the earth itself wants to hold everything down. The throat burns with thirst, every breath scraped raw by the dry air. Skin, blistered and raw, feels as though fire and ice alternate in their attack. Yet the greatest struggle is not with the body. It is with the decision that must be made in the mind. To collapse would be easy, almost merciful. To stand up again, to take another step when everything aches, requires a kind of courage that does not roar but steadies itself in silence. The desert tempts constantly with the promise of stillness. The thought of lying down in the soft sand, closing the eyes, and letting the struggle fade becomes dangerously alluring. It is not an attack but a seduction, offering peace instead of pain. In that moment, the choice becomes clearer than ever. Surrender offers relief, but only once, while fighting promises more pain, but holds the possibility of life. To resist the temptation of stillness is to declare allegiance to hope, no matter how faint. Each decision to keep moving is an act of rebellion against despair. It is a conscious refusal to allow weakness to dictate fate. Though steps grow smaller and slower, though balance falters and vision swims, the act of continuing carries meaning far greater than the distance traveled. It transforms the desert from an unbeatable adversary into a test, one that can only be passed through stubborn persistence. The choice is not about speed or strength, but about refusing to let the desert decide when the struggle ends. This turning point is the moment where survival truly begins. Before, it is the body that dictates action, demanding water, shade, and relief. But once the choice is made to fight despite the absence of these, survival shifts from instinct to willpower. The body becomes a vessel pushed forward by determination rather than comfort. Hunger, thirst, and exhaustion are acknowledged but no longer given power. They exist, they torment, but they do not control. In this state, each step gains a kind of sacred weight. It is not just a movement forward but a statement, a vow repeated again and again with every footfall. Not yet, not now, not here. The desert may offer nothing but suffering, yet the choice to continue transforms that suffering into purpose. Pain becomes proof of existence, a reminder that life still burns within, unwilling to be extinguished. The will becomes sharper than the sun, stronger than the dunes, and more enduring than the silence. The mind, once clouded with fear, begins to steady in this decision. Doubt still lingers, whispering of failure, but it is met with defiance. Despair still reaches out, but it is refused. What remains is focus not on the endless distance ahead, but on the next step, the next breath, the next moment of endurance. Survival ceases to be about reaching the horizon all at once. It becomes about winning the battle of now, over and over again. The choice to fight also awakens clarity. Suddenly, details become sharper. The way the wind carves ripples into the sand, the faint shift of color where the sky meets the horizon, the sound of a single grain sliding down a dune. These observations, once unnoticed, become markers of progress, proof that life persists in motion. The desert no longer appears as one vast enemy, but as a series of challenges, each one faced and endured in turn. This decision is not made once but countless times. Every moment brings the urge to stop, to yield, to give in. And every moment requires answering again, not yet. Courage is not a single declaration, but a continuous choice, repeated in silence through parched lips and trembling muscles. It is forged in the smallest acts of persistence, in the refusal to bow to exhaustion, in the stubborn grip on the belief that each painful step has meaning. Even as the horizon stretches on without mercy, even as the sun burns or the cold night bites, the decision holds firm. The desert cannot understand resolve, but it feels its impact. Each movement forward, no matter how weak or staggered, denies the desert its victory. The choice to fight becomes not only survival but defiance, a testament that even in the harshest emptiness, the will can carve a path where none exists. Blistering winds swept across the dunes, carrying with them a stinging rain of sand that cut against the skin like countless tiny blades. The air turned into a furnace, burning lungs with every shallow breath, and the sun bore down with such intensity that even the shadows seemed to retreat into nothingness. This was no passive landscape, it was a trial, each element of nature conspiring to test the limits of endurance. The desert was alive in its cruelty, relentless in its demand, and every second beneath its gaze felt like standing before a judge that offered no mercy. The days were an unbroken blaze. The ground itself radiated heat, rising through tired feet, scorching from below while the sun scorched from above. Every surface burned to the touch, every breath seared the throat. Clothing, once a shield, now clung like fire, soaked not in moisture but in the heaviness of heat that had nowhere to escape. Eyes narrowed against the brilliance of light reflecting off golden sands, where every ripple of air seemed to shimmer with deceit, luring with false promises of distant water. Survival in such conditions meant more than resisting thirst. It meant resisting the overwhelming pull of despair that the sun pressed into the mind as much as the body. Then came the winds, sudden and merciless. They rose without warning, shrieking across the dunes, tearing into the face with invisible claws. Sand lifted in clouds so dense that the world vanished into a blur of beige. Vision was stolen, direction lost, and the air itself turned solid with dust. Breathing became a battle as grit filled the mouth and nose, scraping raw the throat that already begged for relief. The desert had no need for predators. Its winds alone could suffocate, blind, and strip away all sense of self. Standing against them was not a fight of strength, but of will, planting feet into shifting ground, refusing to be carried away by a force that sought to erase presence entirely. When the sun fell, relief did not come. Instead, the desert unveiled another face, one of bone, deep cold. The sand that had burned like coals only hours earlier now chilled like ice, draining warmth from every inch of flesh. Shivers rippled uncontrollably, muscles tightening against the freezing air. The stars glittered in breathtaking clarity, scattered across the endless sky like shards of glass. But their beauty was distant, unreachable. The cold was immediate, intimate, clawing through thin layers of protection, seeping into marrow. Sleep, tempting in its promise of rest, became dangerous in such cold. To close the eyes too long risked never opening them again. The trial of night was not fire but frost, a reminder that the desert gave no balance, only extremes. Every hour brought a new assault. The sun cracked the lips and blistered the skin, while the wind scoured flesh raw, and the night sought to freeze what little life remained. Each element worked in rhythm, a symphony of torment that left no space for weakness. Hunger gnawed quietly in the background, but thirst overshadowed it, growing sharper with every passing moment. Muscles cramped, skin split, and eyes burned. Even the heart seemed to pound heavier, struggling under the weight of dehydration and exhaustion. Yet beneath this trial, endurance was forged not in a single moment of defiance, but in countless small decisions to continue through pain that seemed impossible to bear. The desert was not only a place of suffering, but also a mirror. It reflected back every fear, every doubt, every hidden weakness. To walk through it meant confronting not just the physical forces of nature, but the inner battles that rose with them. When the sun mocked with illusions, it was a test of belief. When the wind stripped away sight, it was a test of focus. When the cold sought to steal rest, it was a test of persistence. Each element became both enemy and teacher, shaping strength through relentless opposition. The horizon never seemed closer, no matter how far the feet moved. It stretched endlessly, taunting with its unreachable promise. Yet progress was hidden in the struggle itself. Each dune climbed, though replaced by another, marked survival against nature's weight. Each breath drawn through dust and fire marked defiance. Each night endured beneath the freezing stars proved that persistence could outlast even the harshest of trials. The desert did not care, but survival carved meaning from its indifference. Through the fire of day, the torment of wind, and the frost of night, a realization grew stronger. Courage was not born in comfort. It emerged only in the crucible of extremes, when every force worked to break spirit and body alike. Nature's test was not designed to be passed easily. It was designed to demand everything. Yet in demanding everything, it revealed reserves of strength that had remained hidden, buried beneath layers of doubt and fear. The desert gave nothing freely, but in return for endurance, it granted a truth: that survival was possible, not because the trial grew weaker, but because the will grew stronger. The desert had a way of swallowing hope whole. Endless waves of sand blurred into one another, and the horizon mocked with illusions that disappeared the closer they were chased. The body staggered forward, drained of energy, mind clouded by exhaustion, and spirit tested by the brutal stillness of the land. Every breath felt heavier, dry air searing lungs as though fire replaced oxygen. Each step left behind a shallow imprint on the dunes, the only proof of existence in a place where life seemed impossible. The sun hung mercilessly above, glaring like a judgmental eye that refused to look away. Heat radiated upward from the ground, creating ripples that danced in the distance, forming shimmering mirages that taunted with false promises of water. The skin burned under its wrath, peeling, cracking, and tightening as if it had become parchment stretched too thin. Sandstorms occasionally rose, whipping tiny blades of sand against already weary flesh, blinding sight, and testing the fragile will to continue forward. The desert was not just vast, it was alive, cunning, and intent on breaking the spirit. Yet somewhere deep inside, where despair had nearly taken root, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirred. It was not strength, not energy, not relief, but something smaller, quieter. A feeling that life had not abandoned this place completely. Eyes scanned the endless horizon again, and this time there was something different. A shimmer that didn't vanish as quickly as the others. A pattern in the sand that didn't blend into the dunes. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to hold attention. Each dragging step grew a little firmer, as if this faint glimmer demanded closer inspection. The body leaned forward with determination, driven not by certainty, but by the fragile thread of possibility. The mind argued, perhaps another trick, another cruel illusion born of thirst and delirium, yet the heart refused to listen. Instinct screamed that there was something real out there, something beyond this suffocating emptiness. Hours felt like days, but the shimmering shape refused to vanish. The rhythm of footsteps began to change. Exhaustion was still there, but purpose made them steadier. A small indentation in the sand appeared, barely recognizable but too deliberate to be natural. Tracks. They curved slightly, cutting across the dunes with intention, not chaos. No wild creature made such a mark. It was the trace of movement with direction, of something alive that had passed before. Hope surged, fragile but powerful, pushing through the haze of fatigue. If there were tracks, there could be water. If there were tracks, there could be shelter. If there were tracks, survival might not just be a dream. Knees threatened to give out, but the vision of that possibility anchored them. Each footprint, each indentation, became a lifeline. The desert resisted, as if sensing that resolve had found its footing. Winds swept across, erasing parts of the trail, daring perseverance to falter. Mirage after mirage danced nearby, whispering temptation to wander off the path, to chase illusions rather than trust the faint line ahead. But the gaze locked on the tracks, refusing to waver. Survival had become a battle not only of body but of mind. A war against distractions, against the sly tricks of the desert, against the whispers of surrender. The sun began its descent, and with it came shadows that stretched across the dunes like reaching arms. The heat slowly released its grip, replaced by the sharp bite of the coming night. Muscles trembled, skin shivered, yet the tracks still called. The scent of air shifted, faint and barely noticeable, but different enough to awaken senses dulled by suffering. There was moisture somewhere, hidden beneath the sands or carried by the wind. It was faint, but real. The journey dragged on, but the promise of hope made each step less hollow. Thoughts shifted from pain and thirst to vision, imagining the cool touch of water against cracked lips, the relief of shade against burning skin, the sound of life breaking the silence of the desert. What began as a distant flicker now grew into something tangible. The possibility of rescue, the reality of survival, stood just beyond reach, waiting for one last push of endurance. Then, like a gift revealed after endless torment, the shimmer resolved into something unmistakable. Not another mirage, but a cluster of green piercing through the monotony of sand. Palms rose in the distance, defying the desert's cruelty. The faint rustle of leaves whispered on the wind, and at the base of the trees, water reflected the dimming sunlight. It was no illusion, no cruel trick. It was life itself, waiting patiently for courage to arrive. The body trembled, knees buckled, tears blurred vision, but the spirit surged higher than the dunes themselves. Hope had not lied. Persistence had not been in vain. Against the vast emptiness, against the merciless trials of the desert, something had survived, and now, so could the one who sought it. The desert was never meant to be kind. It was a place that stripped away everything unnecessary, comfort, illusion, even dignity, until only the rawest parts of existence remained. In that vast expanse of silence and fire, survival became more than a matter of thirst or hunger. It was a test of spirit, a battle between surrender and defiance, and a discovery of what truly lived beneath the surface of fear. Every trial had left its mark. The burning sun that seared skin and blurred vision, the freezing nights that gnawed into bone, the unending loneliness that echoed louder than the wind. Yet through it all, a choice had been made: to endure, to step forward, even when the body screamed for stillness. That choice was not born from strength alone, but from courage, the quiet force that whispered in the darkness when everything else fell silent. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was walking beside it, refusing to let it lead. When panic clawed at the mind with images of defeat, courage steadied the breath. When despair whispered that the desert would win, courage argued that one more step could change everything. It was not a shout, not a battle cry, but a steady pulse in the veins, keeping the will alive when logic said it was already over. In the heart of the struggle, fear had been the first enemy. Fear of never finding water, fear of collapsing into the sand and being forgotten, fear of the silence that stretched beyond the horizon. But fear, left unchallenged, would have claimed victory. Courage dismantled it piece by piece, replacing it with determination. Each step forward was a rebellion against fear's dominance, a declaration that survival was still possible. Pain followed close behind, relentless and cruel. Muscles tore, skin cracked, and thirst carved its fire deep into the throat. Pain was not silent. It screamed with every movement, demanded attention with every breath. And yet, courage did not eliminate pain. It transformed it. Pain became proof of movement, evidence of life, a reminder that the body still fought to exist. Where suffering could have paralyzed, courage used it as fuel, carrying the weight of agony like armor instead of chains. Doubt was perhaps the most dangerous adversary. It crept quietly, disguising itself as reason. It asked the questions no one wanted to answer. What if there was nothing ahead? What if every effort was wasted? What if survival was not meant to be? Doubt did not lash out like fear or pain. It eroded, slowly and invisibly. Yet courage stood as the counterforce. It offered no promises, no guarantees, only the belief that pressing forward was better than surrendering. In the face of uncertainty, courage became certainty itself. Nature tested every boundary. Days burned without mercy, nights froze without warning, and winds carried sand that cut like glass. The desert cared nothing for suffering. It was indifferent, eternal, unmoved. To endure it required more than strength. It required resolve. Courage provided that resolve, turning obstacles into steps, trials into lessons, and silence into a companion rather than an enemy. Where the desert sought to break spirit, courage turned it unbreakable. And then came the moment of discovery. After endless hours of trudging through emptiness, after doubts nearly consumed the mind, there was proof that endurance had meaning. A glimmer on the horizon that did not vanish. A line of tracks carved into the sand. The scent of moisture carried faintly on the wind. The oasis that finally revealed itself was not just water and shade. It was validation. Proof that every step mattered. Proof that courage had led to salvation. But the triumph was more than finding safety. The true victory was what had been revealed within. Survival was not simply about reaching water, it was about confronting everything the desert had thrown. The fear, the pain, the doubt. and refusing to yield. Courage had turned weakness into resilience, transformed suffering into strength, and uncovered a depth of endurance never known before. The desert had not been defeated. It remained as vast and merciless as ever. But in facing it, something greater had been discovered. The knowledge that even in the harshest landscapes, even when stripped of everything familiar, the will to endure could rise above. The desert tested the limits of body and spirit, but courage had proven stronger than the silence, stronger than the suffering, stronger than the endless horizon. Survival was not an accident, nor was it luck. It was the triumph of a choice to keep moving when stopping would have been easier, to fight when surrender whispered its temptations, to believe when doubt pressed hardest. That choice defined the difference between being lost forever and being reborn through struggle. The story of survival in the desert was not one of the desert itself, but of the courage that walked across its unforgiving sands. A courage that saved not only a life, but also revealed the unshakable truth that even in the most merciless places, the human spirit armed with courage can create victory where none should exist.